Good to go. All right, welcome everyone to Brisbane Azure User Group. This is being recorded. These microphones you see up here, they're super sensitive. They'll override your voice over mine, so they're really good. Just don't talk about anything you really don't want on the video. But welcome. It's just a good tip. So January 2025, if you're not here for this year, I'm sorry, but this is where we're starting today. First of all, big thank you out there to our sponsors. So Codify, thank you very much. So Codify help us out with the beer and the pizza, and Microsoft, thank you very much. So Microsoft help us out with the room, the venue, and organising and helping it out. So this is a community event, and we want to get as much involvement as possible. Doesn't have to be a big thing. We really want to just hear about your experiences with Azure. That's what this group's all about. We're here about sharing our experiences with Azure. So if you are interested in getting involved, we've got a couple of people already. Next month we're gonna have Adam Stevenson. But if you are interested in getting involved, we've got an email address down here. Flick us an email. Let us know. We'd love to hear your experiences. Doesn't have to be something new and fancy. We really want to hear about what you're using, and that could be app service. That could be something kind of old. Like it doesn't have to be the new shiny. A lot of people like to do the new shiny. I'm really stressing it's probably more helpful for people if they're hearing about how people are using Azure in real life. Not the new shiny, but what's actually going on. So let us know. Love to hear from anybody that wants to contribute. I think Dan, okay, sorry. I thought there was a job opportunity that Dan posted because that was a surprise, but anyway. So Dan sends his apologies. Like normally he's here as well, helping us out. But this month, unfortunately, he's not feeling too good. So a few things. It hasn't been super busy last month and a bit, Christmas and all that, but there are a couple of things. So Azure App Service, we have now Session Affinity for proxy. Compatibility went GA. So that just helps you putting app service behind proxies. We had Azure Container Apps. Those are big words. JavaScript code interpreted dynamic sessions. So it's all about that container apps isolating that dynamic code and allowing you to spin that stuff up as you're going. We had customer managed, more big words. It's just killing me. Customer managed unplanned failover for Azure Data Lake storage and storage accounts with SSH file transfer for SFTP. So that was in preview. The other storage accounts for this did go GA earlier. So this is just catching those other ones up to the same level. And so that's when you initiate it, you can fail over to one region. It goes, single region, and then you can fail back and you can upgrade back to get that multi-region capability. So this is something that's kind of like something I'm focusing on a little bit. WebSocket support, so WebSocket's really important for a lot of those modern development use cases. Some of the gateway WAF stuff finds it a little bit tricky to get that out there, but we're starting to see this pick up. So WebSocket support in application gateway for containers went GA. So that's awesome, right? So anyone who's doing that modern development with WebSockets, and there's lots of stuff out there using WebSockets, it's pretty important. So Copilot, we've had a whole a bunch of Copilot stuff lately. So Copilot now for your optimize your disk performance. So we're starting to see Copilot just integrate more and more into the Azure environment, which is great. So just more features coming out. Okay, and so that's pretty much it from the updates. There's a few other little tiny things, but I just didn't bother. Does anyone use Postgres? Azure Postgres? That's not a strong yes. All right, that's cool. Don't worry about it.
So the reason?
No, nothing. Just a bunch of updates I omitted, just lack of attention, lack of focus on my behalf. Potentially I downvoted them. So we've got a Slack channel. We've got a YouTube channel. Check it out. It's pretty cool. This will be up here. There's just some links here for training and some links for blogs. And John Seville, if you don't know who that is, find him on YouTube. He's awesome. Actually, maybe don't, because then you probably won't turn up here. So maybe not. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sam. So we're going to talk about observability. Sorry. So observability and monitoring. So Sam Bell is a senior solutions consultant with New Relic. So welcome, and I'm really looking forward to this meeting. And it looks like you have a lot of swag out there.
Yeah, look, honestly, guys, this is pretty.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Ray's already seen it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. So, thank you, everyone. I'll start off with yes, there is swag outside. Feel free to help yourself. This is not a sponsored event. For context, I used to work at Microsoft. So Bernie and I used to be co-workers. I used to help host the group, and that's why I know Damien and the group. And I assume that's showing. Is that not?
Oh, it's recording.
Oh, we'll go that again. Yay. So there's a link if you want to connect on LinkedIn or you want to.
It's quick though.
Yeah. Very quick. It's annoying. There hasn't been any MacBook comments yet. Try that again. It's be a terrible presentation if you can't stay up. Not even gonna start. Killing me. You are killing me. That's unexpected. Burns, any ideas? I'm not using PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Using
During the
it.
meeting.
And not using that with
That's double strike.
This is fun. Bear with me, please.
Alternatively, like interpretive dance is a good medium.
Would you like to demonstrate?
Let's see.
It's your best ray gun impression.
Oh, God.
It's still too soon.
Maybe it needs to warm up since it's the new year. Try to always win.
So if anyone wants a beer or pizza,
You don't have to invite it all in.
I do not.
Do you have the PPT over your phone?
Sorry?
Do you have presentation over the phone? Otherwise, you can join it and present it from there.
That would be smart. I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, he's just going to forward me the invite. But thank you for the suggestion. Just try again. Out of everything that was going to happen tonight, that was not on my list. I don't have to do a presentation, I don't worry. Okay. Ooh. Well, it does not like it, does it? This is terrible.
That's punishment.
For what? What did I do? Oh, for having slides?
Oh,
Oh, it's true. It's bloody true.
what are giving you a license?
Do now. Thank you. Cool. Yeah. Oh no. I will turn my thing off. Bernie, can you admit me? Please. Fantastic. Great, that is muted. Thank you for muting me too. I will just and nothing's easy, is it? We're nearly there. Because I do not use Teams, I have to allow Teams to work. So 1 second. Great. Join.
You coming?
Yeah,
That place.
oh, awesome. So I'm just going to share my entire screen. It's not like dodgy. It's just
Promises.
yeah. Well, I'm going to hold it for 5 seconds. Oh, yay. Great. Okay. Thank you. Well deserved.
Everybody.
Look, this is definitely very user group as well. So again, ex Microsoft. So I really just wanted to kind of get involved a bit more with the user group. And so even though I am at New Relic does engage with Microsoft and have options for Microsoft, but this is not really meant to be a vendor selling. So this is really just I am in this space. I find it quite interesting, and I would like to share that knowledge with people. So if you find it interesting or if you've learned anything, please come grab me. But this is not a sales pitch at all. This is just me sharing knowledge, which, encouraging is part of the group. Great. So I have this conversation every day, which is what is observability versus monitoring? And monitoring is a subset of observability, but observability is a wider picture. So these are my butchered understandings and translations for it. But to me, monitoring is tracking a predefined set of data points. The CPU utilization, it's at 80%, 90%. I'm tracking a known value, right? But observability, and for all those hipsters and people in the environment now, everyone's calling it Ollie. So kind of like Kubernetes, which I blame, so K8s. So observability, OLLY, terrible. But the idea there is having enough information for you to be able to ask questions and investigate the unknowns. The difference here is that monitoring is you know what you're looking for. So when you build an app, you may know certain data points, but if an incident occurs, you may not have enough information if you don't have the observability, don't have it properly instrumented. I'm going to go into what that means shortly. But in our example about CPU utilization, well, why? Why did the CPU change? Did something happen? Did someone do a deployment? Did someone change the code? Did a process start? Is there patching? Being able to answer the questions about why and what is happening. Great. So I've never done this talk, so this is just me winging it to be really clear with everyone. But I feel that it's a good place to start with just looking at an architecture. So I'm just going to look at an e-commerce platform, think of it like an Amazon, a shopping app. I go to a homepage and I pick something and I buy it, essentially. So I have put this little architecture together. So on the left-hand side, we have our customers, and our customers are going to interact with us through a browser. So Chrome, Firefox, Edge. Then you have your mobile apps, potentially, right? So they might be accessing it through an Android app or through a iOS app. So that's how our customers interact with us. We then have the platform, which is in this example for this user group hosted on Azure. But the platform itself is kind of relevant. The platform will have a web server that serves that where the user interacts with you. Then potentially, in a lot of modern architectures, you'll have an API gateway. In this example, API management from Azure. And behind that will be a set of microservices, maybe based on the different products on that page. You know, as you can see here, search, I look for a product. Orders, where is my order at? In the cart, what have I added to my cart from the product? And in this example, it's running in Kubernetes, Azure Kubernetes specifically. I then probably have an external system, which is going to be a way for me not to have to deal with PII as much, because I pass the problem off to someone else, like Stripe, and I don't have to worry about it. And that's a pretty common architecture pattern. I probably have a database there, so I can store certain states, most likely multiple for products or some kind of caching instance, but this is just a higher level example, right, to talk to. So when I'm looking at that, first thing that comes to me is, well, I'm probably going to want to ask some questions. It's like, well, if I have this application hosted, it's functioning, and I want to get insights from the business, I want to understand what are my customers experiencing. If I'm doing traditional monitoring and I'm only looking at access logs on an Nginx server, I can't see what my customers are experiencing. I can't see their experience. I can't collect metrics. I can't understand how they use my product. I also probably want to know what the friction points are. There's this concept of user journeys. How does someone track through my products? Where are they clicking? Are they doing things I was unaware of? Or are they hitting a bottleneck? We had an instance with a customer where they had an iOS update. And when you're in the middle of it's an insurance company, you're in the middle of getting a quote, you could only get the quote if you restarted to get the iOS patch. And so they had this 40% drop off or so of customers getting quotes on their insurance products because they had a bottleneck and they couldn't visualize it and they didn't realize that was causing financial impact. So it's interesting to note. The other really common one, uptime, availability. Do I have SLAs? Do I have vendors? You know, if I'm up more, I'm potentially making more money because people can use my product. But also while I'm troubleshooting, we've seen that little microservice architecture. There's more than just a UI. You've got all these little different components that you need to measure their availability. And then the other one too, how do people use our UI? It's surprising sometimes when you build out these funnels where you say, okay, everyone goes to a homepage, they go to search, and you view it. And sometimes there's this little thing on the side that people are doing that you're unaware of, and because you couldn't see it. And then one of the important ones, and I've kind of added this in for the group a little bit, is, well, how do I correlate that infrastructure telemetry to application telemetry? One of the biggest problems in my job, I think of the foreseeable future, is it's always a silo between apps, infrastructure. It doesn't matter what title you want to give it, DevOps, cloud engineering. There's always a silo, and it's like, where does that responsibility boundary lay? And that's one of the problems I think New Relic does well, and I'll show you that as well. Great, so that's some useful information, but how do I collect it? Now, I know there's a lot of words on the page. You don't have to read them, and we'll publish a copy of the deck afterwards. But there's really certain concepts when it comes to observability you're going to hear about, and it's essentially that there's a different agent for different areas, right? So from a browser, if you know Edge or Chrome, you're going to have a browser agent collecting telemetry from that area because you want to see what is happening on the user device. And if you're only looking at the server that it's running on, you're going to miss half of the information coming in. Right, so we want to have a little browser, where a little agent running in our browser so it can collect telemetry and you can collect information about JavaScript errors. And what is the user seeing? If someone's on my page and they click product search, if I had instrumented their browser, I can see how long that search took. I can see the errors they're experiencing. And you, if you're only focusing on the infrastructure side and how it's hosted, you're going to miss all that data. Great. So application performance monitoring. I learned this when I joined New Relic, little tidbits. Apparently New Relic created APM as a concept. So they were first company to develop that product, and then it's kind of branched out, and now you'll see it everywhere. And it's essentially, while your code's running on the side, it's something watching how your code is. That's essentially how I view it. And the idea there is that instead of having to explicitly log every request that comes in, it's looking at how your application code is interacting. She sees the requests coming in. And if it's instrumented well enough, it can actually see the database calls potentially behind that request. So you start getting this view, right? So as we're looking at now, we can see what errors or what that user is doing in the browser. We can then see the API calls to the application, and then we could potentially see the database queries. We can see everything end to end so far in our flow. But you also need to look at the infrastructure, whether this is cloud metrics, virtual machine, CPU, memory, the traditional stuff. You obviously definitely still need it. But then we also have an agent for mobile. And so this is probably the most salesy part of it. Just so everyone knows, App Center is retiring. So Microsoft had App Center in March, it's retiring. There is New Relic and other products that do it. But I do want to show you that because I do think it is a good offer within New Relic. But you embed an agent within your code, and it captures information like versions, how people use it, the flow they're doing. But then you can start doing cool things like distributed tracing. Instead of just seeing this one request and the response, you can see all those different hops between that request, and you can see the entire journey visually, and you can track where it's taking time. If you just look at a whole request, I sent something to Bing, I got a 200, and it was a 1 second response time. What is the breakup of that? Where is the time being taken? And if I want to optimize my experience, I need that information. And then finally, synthetics. So synthetics is proactive monitoring. So some of this can be grouped in digital experience monitoring, real user monitoring. There's all these different terms. The idea here is that you have something proactively checking your site. You're checking your APIs, internal, external. You can check your vendors' APIs available and working. You can collect that data periodically and then view it. A lot of customers I work with put it on a traffic light dashboard, and they have a simple view that when there's an incident, everyone goes to the dashboard and they'll see green, orange, or red. And then it helps them to narrow down what they're looking at when they're troubleshooting. So a lot of agents, does require a little bit of effort. Everyone in the industry is trying to simplify the effort now, but this is currently the standard for everyone. This isn't just a specific New Relic thing. Great. So I wanted to come back to the diagram we drew, and I wanted to kind of walk through it left to right. So we have our customers on the left. Now, if I was going to instrument this, I'm going to need to put in my opinion, I'm going to want synthetics. Synthetics give me that ability to check, can a user come to my website and perform a flow potentially? Synthetic monitoring can also be like a UI test. So you can have someone log into your website, search for a product, and check out the product. You can actually do a flow, and you can verify whether certain parts of your application is functioning. You can do it for API endpoints as well. Next one's browser. Well, browsers, I have customers using the browser. I want to understand what errors they're experiencing. I want to know what their performance is. And finally, mobile. Again, I want to understand, is there a certain bug with version 1.1 versus version 1.2? Are we actually fixing errors, or are they regressing? What is the user experience, essentially? Okay. Actually, I will ask, and this doesn't have to be interactive, but has anyone heard of the Core Web Vitals before? Thank you. It's essentially Google published these specific metrics. We'll look at them in a second, and I'll give you the names for them. But they're basically how Google has identified what a performant website is. So there's 3 specific metrics. I'm going to visualize them on the screen, and then I'm going to use that as a cheat to remember the 3, but we'll get back to that. And one other cool one is session replays. So there's a lot of technology now. You can do full story. New Relic does it as well. And the ability is that you can sample, so you can capture when something happens in your website. So it's no longer just telemetry. For example, if someone has an error checking out in my product, adding something to my cart, or any error, you could actually record that session. What if you were troubleshooting and you had a video recording of exactly what your user did, tied into the telemetry for the backend calls, the error message, and you could easily replicate it. You can see the frequency, you can see exactly what happened. Yeah, it greatly reduces the troubleshooting time, essentially. Great, so we'll move to the platform piece. And so this again has synthetics. I highly rate synthetics. I love the idea of being able to actively test certain components. And it doesn't just have to be, is my website working externally? It could be something internal. Can I connect to an internal on-premise system? You know, if I'm running in Azure and I've got an express route, can I connect in and talk to that legacy system I'm referring to? Right, you can do a lot of cool stuff with this. You can also use it for internal communication. Even though these instances are in a container, maybe they're restricted for access because they're behind an API gateway, you could actually have a synthetic agent in the cluster verifying certain thing is functional. That's an example. Got APM, that's our application performance monitoring, the thing looking at how our code is running. It's going to allow us to capture things like exceptions, essentially code that is running, that is having an error that is unexpected. You can catch it, you can handle that, it's unhandled. But one of the cool things too is that APM technology can capture outbound requests automatically. And a lot of these tools now can build out an automatic map. So one problem with technology that I've always faced is building out diagrams, tracing what's happening. If I go to a new organization and I'm trying to figure out the environment, well, isn't it useful to have a real-time map that shows me exactly what is talking to what at any given time? So that's great. And also the database query stuff I think is pretty useful. So instead, if you tie all that in together, you can see the request, you can see the breakdown of the request. And then for each breakdown, you can then see the query time for each component. Pretty cool. Right, so this is an Azure user group. So I should probably touch on what some Azure tooling is. Now, Azure does have a few things. Again, my little comment about Center retiring. I think it is end of March. But I have used industry standard terms like browser and APM and synthetics. That is all captured in application insights. So Azure has an option for application insights. They do auto instrumentation when you deploy certain things. And we'll have a quick look at it. But I've taken a screenshot from the Azure Monitor view. You can kind of see all the different options here. But essentially, App Insights does a mixture of browser, APM, and I'm going to be a little judgmental, a subset of synthetics. We then have Azure Monitor, which is collecting, 90 days worth of metrics for free for the different instances. You can then capture logs, log analytics workspaces. I put metrics there twice because technically you can export metrics to logs and do a thing there. But you also have agents. The traditional, I have a virtual machine, I want to collect a log file on a virtual machine. That'll always be a use case. And then finally, we've got workbooks. Now, I'm a very big advocate for workbooks. They're basically Microsoft's custom dashboarding solution. They're really powerful, but really complicated. You can do some really cool stuff with them, but they get messy quickly. Great. And so I'm not going to go into the Azure board and show App Insights simply because I'm a vendor of sorts. But look, Application Insights, when you load Application Insights, you'll see the overview page is essentially a holistic view of any application sending data to. Now, if you think about that, I've told you can get APM data from servers from the code. You can also get browser data from the UI. All of that feeds into Application Insights, into this overview. So from my experience, I view Application Insights as kind of a solution-focused tool, right? And I'll touch on why I'm making that difference a little bit later. With App Insights, you can filter. So by default, it's looking at everything sending data to it. You can then filter it to a specific application. You can then toggle that to be CSV server to browser. You can then toggle that to look at the browser data versus the server data. So it has most of the data there out of the box and ready to go. And I guess, sorry, the last bit to cover is that there are comments about the UI. What Microsoft have done to address the way the data is displayed is they've built on the workbooks. I made a comment earlier about them being very powerful, and they are. So when you were troubleshooting and using it, there's a little button here saying workbooks, and they have custom views to try to address the fact that the UI doesn't show that data. Most of the data's there. It's just the UI right now isn't showing it by default, but the data does exist, and they give you these curated views as part of a dashboard. Great. So what is New Relic? I just want to keep it super quick. New Relic is essentially a cloud software as a service offering. It's cloud agnostic. It works on all three clouds essentially. Haven't confirmed Alibaba, but I will do that. It provides intelligent full stack observability. I think it would be remiss of me to do a user group and not say AI once. AI is in there. There is some cool stuff coming out. If you are interested in knowing about the cool stuff, we have a big announcement in February. They're adding in quite a few new products. AI will be mentioned a few times, but it is actually very exciting, to be honest with you. Some of the stuff that is coming out, I'm excited. We are in Gartner industry leader for about 12 years now. So we are actually acknowledged in this space. We do work with Azure. We are available by the Azure Marketplace as well. So if you do want to set New Relic up, you can do it through the Azure Marketplace and play around. But also, one of the reasons why I like the company is you can actually set up a free account. You can go in, you don't have to put a credit card, you don't have to do any pay get walls or anything. Set up a free account, you can send 100 gig worth of data, and you can try basically everything I've spoken about today for free without putting money in, right? There's free training, there's all this stuff. If you don't even want to set something up, you can go to our New Relic University, sign in, they'll give you credentials to an account that's already set up, and you can go and look at it yourself with all the data already published. So I think that's pretty cool. So this is probably the cool part now. I'm actually just going to show a couple of things. Now, if anyone is interested, I'm going to try to show, I think, one or two things specifically. But if anyone does want to see something in particular, just ask, right? I'll do my best to show it off. Yeah. Awesome. So I have pre-signed in because all of my computer problems. And let me just. Yeah, good. Awesome. So we are in, I'll just go straight to the page. This is the default view for New Relic, and I will get rid of my admin access because that is annoying. Great. So we're in New Relic. This is the default view. This view is completely customizable. You can do things like, I want to look at my entities and have alerts. Now, I accidentally already used the word entity. What I was doing before when I mentioned App Insights, I mentioned it's a solution view. New Relic has an entity-focused view to start with. What I mean by entity is the application, right? You've got a browser app. You've got one of those checkout APIs or the product API. That is an entity to us. And the difference there is that we focus our view on how that entity is going rather than looking at the entire solution. We have options to look at the entire solution, but when you're troubleshooting, you may want to focus on that specific issue that you're addressing or look at one specific application that is having problems. So we have a lot of different views. You can come in here and say, hey, show me only things that have errors. And it'll navigate down. It'll get rid of all the data types. You can change it. You can go and look at only browser apps that have errors, right? You can come and see things and interact with it quite easily. The ones I want to focus on quickly is mobile. So I'm only doing this because of the App Center stuff. So we've got a demo app, and my demo app is called Demo Gorgon. Which I'm just going to take as a cool name. And I have some data coming. So there's a lot of information I can show you. I'm going to speed run parts of this. You can assume that you can see information on errors. We're going to go and look at some of the crashes, but at a higher level, you can see all the information for your users. You can see what version of iOS they have, Android. All of the expected data is here. You can see the geography. Where are my users based? You can even see the version and the errors by version, right? We've got all the information here. So if you were tracking something from a mobile app and you wanted to know, is that error related to a certain device? You have that data, right? Everything is here. You can see where users are accessing your website from. Now, I've chosen to focus specifically on the crashes view. So we have something where it's called error inbox. And so when you see an error in your application, it's going to be related to a certain version. You can come in here into the portal and mark it as resolved. You can say that it's been fixed in a specific version. You can even assign the error to a coworker and say, hey, what is this? If you do that and the error reoccurs, it'll come up saying, hey, this regressed in version 1.2 natively, and you can report on that. Great, so I got some data coming in, got some errors. One of the cool things is you can kind of come in here and visualize it, right? I'm saying error. Well, what was the error? I can see here the specific version of code, when it happened. I can even see the line of code, and you can actually see exactly what happened in this example. And I hope that is better for people. You can publish the stat trace too if you need, but I can actually see the exact line of code that the error occurred. And if I really wanted to, I could come in and look at the user journey. How did they get to that specific state in my mobile app that generated the error? Again, it's context. And that's something you'll see if you read a lot of the New Relic documents, is the focus of the product is in context. If you're just looking at a mobile error and you don't understand how did I get to that stage, or if I'm looking at a browser error and I don't know how the user clicked there, it's very hard to troubleshoot. It's very hard to figure out what is happening. So one of the focuses of our platform is to do it in context. Great. So mobile was one of the things I wanted to show. I did want to briefly look at synthetic.
I have a quick question.
Shoot.
So if you have HTTP errors or just HTTP requests, can you link that up with what you have in Azure Application Insights?
So this one's not going to connect to Application Insights because it's going to be all New Relic data. But if you were looking at the data in New Relic, you absolutely could. So you could come in here and see the request. So in my example for my app, it went to demo Gorgon prod. That's an actual website if anyone's interested. That's what one of our demo apps are. You can see the request, the response time, and you can start looking at the data. You can see how in. You can see what the averages are. And you can start breaking it down into exactly what happened to what users. And one of the cool things I love about the platform is this little link at the top. So whenever I'm troubleshooting, I can literally just give someone a link to the exact page I'm looking at. I don't have to give them instructions. It's a link. If I've got an incident in the middle of the night and I've got a run book or a playbook someone's using, I can give them this link.
It's a good picture. That's really good.
There's also the, I think this third time, there's an AI. So if you need some context, the AI does give you context about what you're looking at. And if you need some guidance about how to dive deeper into what's happening.
Question for the mobile, do you have to integrate the agent into the mobile app for deployment? So when you're building the app, you've got that. That's all.
Yeah, that's fine. Of course.
That's my voice. Yes,
That's all right.
That's
all right. So the cool thing too is that you can also look at those traces, right? So I mentioned earlier a trace. I didn't dive into what a trace is. Trace is essentially the request that was initiated. A trace will have spans. So if in my distributed architecture, I talk to different subcomponents, each one of those sub requests would be a span. Essentially, it's the entire journey to complete that transaction. And you can see here, this one has a couple of spans. I can then go and look at what is happening. I can investigate, well, where did my time go? And you can actually visualize how I'm zoomed in. It's quite zoomed out. But you can actually visualize. So from my mobile app, I hit an application called Frontend that then went to shopping service, that then went to cart service. So I can actually visualize this in real time. So if my architecture changed and I still have this trace, I can see the old flows of that. And if there was a specific error here, it would be red. You visualize it. So that's probably a good section to go into. Well, I don't know what I'm looking at. I click on here. What is front end? Well, we can see the word APM, but I can just come in here and click detail, and it will take me to that APM view. Now, this is one of the environments that has a lot of errors to show some of the views, but this is the overview page where we're looking at an application. And so that was that difference from the entity view versus the solution view. If I'm troubleshooting what's happening with the front end app, I can see here that there are 2 security issues. I can see that since the last deployment, errors have gone up 9%. I can see service levels. I can define a service level for that application, uptime, response time, and I can have it mapped directly to the resource. And you can see when it's happening. You can also send vulnerability data, if my dependencies are out of date. If you want to have that in New Relic, you can then just run a query to say, well, either my dependencies are my applications vulnerable to Log4j, which is the classic example. But I can come in here and kind of get a view of what's happening. And if I had done a deployment, which you can see here, the deployment overlays on all of the screens you're going to see. So you can then click into it and see, did Sam make a change? You can go and see what change I made. You can tie it down to the Git repo, to the commit, and to the pipeline. But the cool thing here is that it's overlaid on top of what you're looking at. So if you're not sure and you come here, what changed? Sam deployed 20 minutes ago. And then there's been a 20% increase in errors. It's all here and available. Now, for the saving time, this is one of the views. So this is quite a detailed view. You can change how you look at it. You can filter it to see certain things. You can change the depth of the relationships if you're interested. So instead of doing it at one level, you can do it multiple, but it's basically a representation of your current state for the application. Who is calling me and what am I calling? And are there any errors?
Can you see response times on that? Or
Yeah. So in this example, because there's so many and I'm so zoomed out, you can come in here and I should be able to get in. I'm sorry, where is it? There it is. So it'll bring up on the right-hand side the resource it's calling, and then you can then see the response times for them. You can see the throughput, and again, it has the deployments overlaid for it.
those response times, do they model the 90 something percentile versus the
I think this is just the raw data.
just raw data?
There are other views to look at the percentiles, but yeah, so if I went into transactions as an example, I could then come in here and look at the percentiles. I can go and look at the different ways the data is coming in, and then you could go and break it down into the database queries and the throughput.
You sort of touched on something really important, and I haven't yet seen a tool that does this really well. And App Insights is definitely not in that category. But financial value, it's really important from a business engagement perspective.
It is.
Do you have anything that sort of models user experience correlated to financial value and financial loss?
Yeah, so
Financial value comes into it when you capture their credit card numbers. So
100%.
so when you don't do a payment gateway, but you do a pass through.
that's exactly it. Yeah. Sorry, let's turn the recording off, gentlemen. So there's two options. I mentioned about customer journeys. There's different ways you can track how a user uses the website, but that doesn't directly tie into business value or the KPIs or whatever that is.
Because a lot of these tools have got an enormous amount of value, especially for technical people, but they fail to engage the business stakeholders and let the actual value of their products be driven from the business and the visualizations of the business can get out of these tools, but often never does.
Isn't that another space? That's what your digital marketing team do. They
Well, they
look
should
at Google Analytics and they look at customer
It's
journeys.
far better than Google Analytics, though.
Exactly. Because if you do Google Analytics only, you're only looking at the clicks, the interaction,
Yeah.
you're getting marketing information. Fantastic. But what if my site's offline?
You
How
miss-
do I tie that into something? And the same thing with applications. I know that this group might be more familiar with cloud or infrastructure, but we're basically paid to provide a service to the business. That's essentially, managing service, keeping things online. So we have this thing, you don't pay for it. It just views your data in a different way. It's called Pathpoint. You can basically just build your own flow. So what I've been doing with customers is, building out a flow. So a logical grouping, got our stages at the top, job, order, notify, deliver, right? Something super basic. You can name that however you want. This doesn't require any code either. And you can then come in here, pick a level. You can go, hey, this is my front end. This is my login app. You can then just group the entities from New Relic. If you've already got the data in New Relic, you can then just link them to this view. So it actually puts the whole ecosystem in context. Instead of saying I have a Kubernetes cluster, you can say, well, I've got a front end app, I've got a product catalog, and I can put it in the context for the business.
Is there something that models the user experience, the value of a user experience to failures and service degradation?
Yeah, so you can
ties that together, because that's the real value is going, my system, my customer engagement, whatever, has got a bunch of components. Each of those components has got an investment value.
Yeah.
Based on the user experience, the return of possible user experience, there should be a nominal investment into platform that will deliver a better financial value.
get that.
Courses for courses. Because examples with just before Microsoft took over LinkedIn, there was a big thing about dropout of people signing up because it was too complicated. So they made the sign up process much more simpler.
Yep.
So the initial things were, yeah, we've got wonderful intake. There's no dropout of or very little dropout of people going through the sign up process.
Yep.
But later on, they realised that while they had an increase of people signing up, the return customers, which is in another area,
Yep.
had dropped off by about the amount that they had increased.
Yeah.
Because people hadn't put as big an investment into the sign-up process, it wasn't embedded into their mind as a piece of value.
So a holistic tool that told me both of
Well,
those would
what
be
I'm
amazing.
getting at is it's horses for courses in that, in what site you've got depends on what the value is
Yeah.
in the interactions.
I think it's also there's different ways to display the data potentially. So this data, this is a way to put the business flow in the context of, well, are my users having a good experience? Are my applications running? I can map all of that. And right at the bottom, you can then define whatever KPIs they are.
Is there any way where we can capture how many requests were there by a particular user?
Yeah, you can map.
So that can be like counted down and monetary aspects can also be calculated over it, because nowadays we see so many applications who are asking for payments based on a number of requests, right? DC,
Yep.
20. So that can happen.
Yes, you can. By default, we try not to capture user data because it's easier to default out and have people opt in. But yes, you can absolutely add a GUID, you can add an identity, you can add your own marker to that user. And then as they're interacting with it, that is an attribute that can be used to map that flow. So we have this concept of users impacted. So when you're looking at that errors, you're not just looking at errors, you have the context of how many individual users were impacted by the errors total. So if you've got 10,000 errors, it may only be 1,000 users, as an example. But the cool thing here is, I guess, this KPIs. If you have any data coming into the platform, you have a specific, SLA or anything that you're monitoring, whether it's how many orders have happened without an error, payment errors, as an example, there's confirmations. You can have that tied to the data in New Relic. And I think this is the coolest part, is that you can play the data back over time. So the idea here is that if you map all of your entities, you have the option of picking a time series, or you have an incident, for example, and one of your components go offline. If you have the data in New Relic and it's set up, you can do a playback. You can watch what happened when your incident went off. So you can see, hey, did my database go offline? And when my database went offline, I then had an issue with my checkout. You can visually see what is happening in your environment and tie that into business revenue. because all of this dashboard will change based on that increment as it's replaying it to you, which I think is pretty cool, to be honest.
Very good too for debugging.
This one I haven't got it changing, but if there was an error and the whole thing would go red, you would see the specific component that changed colors, and then you'd be able to see what's happening. And all those different data types I spoke about, the synthetics, browsers, APM, you can visualize all of them here. You could put an alert on here. That's a combination of the two. You could say we were unable to sell stuff, and you could visualize that here as well.
So whereabouts is this in New Relic?
So it's under apps. So if you go into apps, there is an app here called PathPoint, and you can just add it for free. Yeah. It's kind of relatively new, probably from about November. There was version 1, version 2. This is very much a supported product, and it's something that we're going to be talking a lot about. This is something cool, very novel. You can build your own apps and put them on top of New Relic. You can actually write your own custom React app, and you could have that on New Relic, looking at New Relic data.
You also mentioned that there is a way of sharing the link of exactly what you are looking into. So do you guys have any integration points with Jira or some kind of board where we can create directly the tickets which can be assigned to?
Exact integrations. There's absolutely PagerDuty integrations. There's Slack, there's Teams. I think there's you had to record the session. We can check. We'll check in a second. But I don't think there's like on that error inbox where you acknowledge the error. I don't believe there's any integration there currently. But we can take a look. Now, I don't want to keep ranting too long. I just want to show one last thing. And I want to go back to that example here. Actually, two things. Apologies. I mentioned in context. So I'm looking at an application right now. Maybe I'm a developer and there's a lot more to this application. There's going to be potentially logs. There's going to be the infrastructure hosting it. So in this example, New Relic, based on the data coming in, has identified that this application is running on Kubernetes. And now that it's identified that, it'll actually map the Kubernetes data to the application. So instead of going to a different dashboard or going to a different area, trying to map it, it's all here, again, in context. Now, you can see if there are any deployments. You can see if there's any errors related to the Kubernetes entities. Is the container running? Is it crashing? You can see how many of the containers are running. You can see the logs on the container. Instead of having to go figure out how to write a log query in a different language in a different portal, you can click through it here. You can see what the utilization is. You can see if there's any events and errors. It's all here in context, essentially. So if you don't know what you're looking at and you're trying to figure out stuff, that's the reason why we've chosen an entity view, is to be able to look at information that we've found that your app's doing in one place for you. So if you don't quite know what you're looking at, you can come in here and it'll give you that context. You don't have to join it on a custom dashboard. You don't have to build anything special out. It's here and mapped for you. I mentioned security. If you do send the security data, you can see vulnerabilities. You can search for them. You can see the updated versions if you want. There's some pretty cool stuff there. And then you can also see logs. So if you're not sure what you're looking at, you can come in here and say, well, here are all the logs. I haven't gone to a different screen. I haven't written any queries. I've just clicked 3 times. And I have the exact logs for that resource at this time. And then that's my... Yeah.
So have it on DSL language, or if it's like KQL? Like...
Yeah, so if you want to interact with logs, there's 2 languages. There is the standard New Relic query language. So everything that you see is a query language. You can display the data yourself at any given point. It's basically a SQL-like language. But if you want to interact with logs, we also offer Lucene as a language. Perfect. So the last thing I would love to show is browser. There's a lot of other stuff that we can go through. There's special views for Kubernetes. There's a lot of cool stuff. But the last one I wanted to quickly show was, I keep talking about this thing for Web Vitals. I told you I was going to cheat and look at this. So this is our view for the browser. Again, what our clients see from their actual browser when they interact. So you can see a high error rate. Haven't looked at that. But you can also see session replays. So you actually see on this main page that I have a recording of an error that I could watch. So I can actually see the specific errors, that 8% error rate. I could come in here and see the exact click and flow and the error message that's related to that.
Are you able to play one?
Yeah, I will in a moment. Yeah. We also have these core web vitals. This overview page, summary page, provides a bit of an overview, of course. But if we were to break it down a little further, so you can see it on the Web Vital page. So we've got these 3 key metrics. There was another one, it's been deprecated, details, but largest contentful paint. So essentially the loading performance of the website. There are specific metrics that Google use and that we've picked up on that are industry standard that aren't in all browser tools currently.
How does it compare to the is it Lighthouse?
Yes, I was thinking as well.
It basically gets the same data to some degree. That's what it is. And the idea there is that when you run Lighthouse, if anyone doesn't know, it's essentially within your Chrome browser. You can open up the developer tools, click on Lighthouse, then you can run a bit of a review of your site. It gives you feedback for SEO, security, a few other things. This is similar. It's not quite as extensive, but the cool thing here is that you can measure it over time. You can track it. You can add stuff to this as well if you wish. So I can see, hey, my website's pretty good. But if it wasn't, I could start breaking this down into certain pages that aren't performing. I can have a view of how do I make my website better for my customers. Right? You can try all of this in. Again, I'm just going to paint that last picture of the tracing. I can see the click from a user on my website in the browser, clicking checkout. I can trace that all the way down to the last API call or a vendor interaction within my applications. We've got service levels. Again, you define what is healthy for your organization. You can have them mapped here and you can track how well that application is going. But I did promise Damien, lastly, that I would do a error. Now, this is probably, I think it went live around October. Again, don't hold me to this, but this is essentially our way of capturing errors. Or sorry, to record sessions for users. Now, it's not just for errors. We can see here the different clicks. We can see the interactions. You can see the DOM as the user actually interacts with the website. You can see the specific error message that they've had.
That's awesome.
And then you can go and see the other occurrences. All of this ties into the rest of the environment. So this
handle sensitive data on the pages.
So basically, by default, we don't capture the text unless you explicitly tell it to include specific objects on the page.
Okay, cool.
So
mask it out, sort of thing. Or...
yes, it just doesn't send it through.
So you have to curate your agent with regards to what it captures, or by default there's text fields no, but there's
Exactly.
clicks go through.
How big and what is the size of that kind of file?
So it depends on the session that was recorded, of course. What we've observed is it's about 3 to 4 meg on average for a recording. And there hasn't minimal impact, but it's about 3 to 4 megabytes per recording that comes through. Now, that's a really good question. For those who don't know, New Relic does billing based on data ingestion. So it's like, hey, if I turn this on, I get a lot of data, that's cost. One of the cool things about this feature is actually that, well, you can tell us how much data you want to send us. So you can say, hey, I only want to capture errors. And I want, say that was 10%. You can specify the exact amount that you would actually record. And you can say, I only record errors. I don't want to see the rest of it. I only want errors. You can then come in here and customize the privacy. You can say, only collect text for these CSS selectors. You know, block data coming from anything that says credit card, as an example. So you have a lot of control, very granular control about what is recorded and the frequency in which it's recorded. So yes, that's just...
So how does it do the screenshots? Does it use the live website, or does it somehow get it from the browser?
It captures it from the browser. Yeah. So a lot of the browser agents are using within Chrome and everything, there's actually APIs that are available that are doing certain things. A lot of these browser extensions are kind of looking on this browser agents are looking on the side, catching that data and then potentially sending it through. So for New Relic and for a lot of them, you'll usually, even App Insights, you'll see something called a JavaScript snippet. This big long code snippet, and this is what will execute as the agent in your customer's browser and collect the data on the side. It'll then publish it to New Relic or to App Insights. That's an example. Sorry, is that someone else?
Yes. So the data that New Relic uses for building all of the UI and all of the features around it is purely the browsing data. There's no other assimilation needed with any other, say, Azure service.
For browser, for the exact page we're on right now, yes. But you can embellish it by adding, in that you had a second ago, when I'm looking at the application, I can then have the Kubernetes data. Having that data then gives me that extra insight to say, hey, did someone do a deployment in Kubernetes that broke my app?
Okay, so log analytics integration would help enrich the profile and fill up some of the other pages that you work with.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You can have that data come in. You could have logs be matched to the entity. And so remember before I went to the log section and it showed me, as long as it comes in and it's mapped, essentially, we use metadata to figure out names and a few other cool things. Any other question? Hey.
Okay.
What load testing tool do you recommend that integrates well with either New Relic or Application Insights that could generate useful info across multi-component apps? So like that point app could show useful information from a load test. Is there a tool that you recommend?
Specifically load testing tool?
Yeah, around load testing tools that you recommend that work well, that generate good data that you can say that, yes, I've got good Ollie, I've got good observability.
Yes. There is Azure load testing tool.
Yeah.
That is an option available. If you are in that ecosystem, it does have the native App Insights integration. So when you run that load test tool, you can select which resources or which App Insights instance you want to look at. And so when that load test run, you can see some similar stuff.
It can receive browser instructions to simulate a user or no?
That's one.
In other words, you're not 400 hits on the main page and everyone goes, hey,
that's one of the Microsoft-ish limitations I mentioned before about like synthetics and that testing. Synthetics in Azure are basically what URL do you want to hit? What response am I expecting? What header do I send? Okay. You can't do UI testing.
Yep.
In New Relic, and I know that's sort of where we're going. In New Relic, we have the ability to create synthetic monitors. You can come in here and you can create your own monitor. You can do a basic ping. Here's my website online, but you can actually get to the level of a UI test. You can actually have the user come through, click through and perform tasks to visualize it. Now, I know that that's not your question. The question is more about the performance testing piece. If you're going to do UI performance testing, I mean, there's the classic JMeter, there's K6. I prefer, personally, Artillery. I think Artillery is quite good. There's Locust. There's a lot of good ones. JMeter is the default, usually referenced as the default. And Microsoft's load tester does support the JMeter files. So if you wrote them in JMeter, you could upload them to Microsoft and then use that to execute the tests. But it's XML, it's a little bit older.
I mean, it'd be absolutely amazing if you could use the New Relic user experience data to point to a lower environment and execute load testing.
I hate this.
That's a future opportunity.
Stay tuned for February.
Yeah. Okay. Good. If you're doing that,
I mean, I'm saying it, but there's a chance. They shouldn't tell me anything. But there's some cool stuff. Look, even if you don't know how to write these tests, you can actually do like a zero code. Hey, I want to build it, and they'll actually walk you through how to build a UI test without writing code. But I know it's 7:30. We all want to go home. I'm going to get out of the demos. I'm not even going to do the value add stuff. This is the last slide I want to kind of end on. And I'm going to leave it like that out of principle now. But look, I mentioned monitoring and observability. Monitoring to me is a subset of observability. I'm not just looking at the known problem, Right? I've set up a condition, CPU utilization. I know what that is. I can set that up. But as we all know, as we're building software and using applications, a lot of stuff happens that you're not aware of, right? And you need a lot more context to answer questions. You know, capacity planning. We ourselves eat our own dog food. A lot of the new products we are using ourselves, and we use our own product to save ourselves money. So we are definitely invested in and have our own use cases for. And the last thing too is just a lot of people use these tools reactionary. So it's like, say, I have an incident, I have an outage, something happens, and then everyone jumps to New Relic or App Insights. The whole power of observability is being able to use that data at any time. I want to improve my user experience because, you know, I'm having users drop off because it's not working. I have bottlenecks in my application. I want to save money. We ran our own tests to save money on our environment. We found that changing instances saved us a lot of money. We used our own data for it. So the take-home point for anyone is essentially don't just use these tools reactionary. Like don't use it in response to an incident only. You can have a lot more value if you use it also to be proactive and actually improve that experience. And I will just leave that as that, really. Any questions?
Just a couple. So with the agents and so on, do you have any difficulties with things like antivirus or proxy rules and so on, stopping the agents sending stuff back, identifying them as promiscuous or?
So not really from the antivirus perspective, but from the proxy perspective, I think it's the same thing with a lot of tools. If a proxy strips a header, you can't see things. So it depends upon the implementation of the proxy. Usually, no, not really. But if there is a rule in the proxy that says remove the trace header, you can't see the trace, basically.
So the other aspects having some experience with SCOM, Dynatrace, and Splunk, the agents themselves impost on the actual performance of the object. So things like your Kubernetes clusters, which proportionally is small, succinct chunks of code, having an agent trying or also interacting there. Are there any lessons from the field to be aware of with regards to the impost of the agent actually itself impacting upon the performance of the solution?
A lot of there's a different data type. The different agent types.
Yeah.
Browser agent, there's well documented to say there's almost no impact. I can't say that there's no impact, and especially with this damn recording. But look, usually there's not. There's a lot of findings, a lot of studies saying there's not, but in certain instances, I'm troubleshooting something right now where it's a certain mobile framework that isn't playing as nice as expected. So it's not guaranteed. We cover most of the languages, the primary ones, or at least the ones that are very popular right now. There's a minimal impact. In the Kubernetes example, there's like Kubernetes itself, there's like 15 different ways to integrate with Kubernetes. So it's like depending upon that integration, there is a slight overhead. If you're running something that's doing something, it's going to consume resources. But we've tried to keep it as minimal as possible. So you can have a .NET container that is, maybe 100 megabytes of memory, and you can have our agents embedded in. So it doesn't use a lot of resources, but nothing's nothing, basically.
So do your agents, I think of the Dynatrace example, do they inject into the code in the JIT and put particular reporting points or logging points, or does it stand off to a degree to do the observability?
By default, so I'm going to use a Node.js app, for example. So in Node.js, I would bring in the New Relic dependency into my project. And then when I have imported that into the code, it is running. It is now watching my transactions and catching as much data as possible. If I then wish to catch a log, I can then use New Relic.log, whatever it is, whatever that functional method is, to then capture that log message. So it depends on your level of instrumentation and how you want to use it, basically.
Something you almost touched on is the right sizing capability. You're saying you're using it to save money.
Yeah.
Is that integrated with the same change tracking that you use for the Git kind of functionality?
Yeah.
Can you automate, let's say I changed a SKU and this is the effect? Is that
that's what we did. So
Okay.
I don't know how much
Out
I
of
want
what?
to talk about, but cut the recording. Basically, we noticed that our price and cost were going up for running, and we had to do something. Otherwise, certain things weren't commercially viable as products. So we actually started making changes, and instead of thinking about a change as just a software version update, we started sending changes to say, hey, we're changing the instance size, we're patching this product, we're changing the disks. And so when we're looking at the data over time, we can see what the specific impact was. We actually, I think this is well documented, we use a cell-based architecture. When we're testing now, we actually spun up a secondary cell, reading the data from the Kafka topic, so it's in parallel, and we just tested it all alongside the customers. And in our test environment, we test data, of course. But yeah, we sent those changes through, tested it, had very clear, quantifiable data. I think, again, I don't know if it's public, but we did save several million based on that activity.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Sam, thank you very much. Open from the crowd.
Thank you.
So next month, I believe we have Adam Stevenson. Anyone's keen to present? Maybe New Relic's February release. But yeah, let's say. So thanks very much, guys. If you could grab your rubbish and take it out. Yeah, I think we're all good.
Thank you.